My parents bought business class tickets for my sister's family, but sent my son and I on a 12-hour bus. Same destination, same vacation, same family. But Jennifer's daughter flew first class while my 8-year-old Dylan got motion sick on winding mountain roads. Mom laughed. "Did you think you'd fly business?" My sister smirked. "A filthy bus suits you perfectly." Her child sneered, "Mom, buses stink," as they waved goodbye from the airport. But my parents had no idea this trip would change everything forever. I'm Rebecca Martinez, and for 34 years, I believed family meant everything. Growing up, I was the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed over arguments and made sure everyone was happy. When Jennifer got married to Mark and had Emma, I was the aunt who babysat for free, who remembered every birthday, who showed up to every school play even when Jennifer herself was too busy. So when Mom announced our first ever 3-generation family vacation to Hawaii, I actually cried happy tears. Finally, I whispered to Dylan as I tucked him into bed that night, "We're all going to make beautiful memories together." My 8-year-old son's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Are we really going to see volcanoes, Mom? And swim with sea turtles?" I kissed his forehead, my heart swelling with anticipation. "Yes, baby. We're finally going to have the family vacation I always dreamed of." The planning phase felt like a warm embrace. Mom called me every few days with updates. The resort had 3 pools. There was a kids club for Dylan and Emma. Dad had already researched the best snorkeling spots. Jennifer seemed genuinely excited too, texting me photos of matching Hawaiian shirts she'd bought for Emma and Mark. For the first time in years, our family group chat was filled with laughter emojis and heart reactions instead of the usual polite silence. But there was something in Mom's tone during our last planning call that should have been my first warning. "Rebecca, honey," she said, her voice carrying that particular sweetness that always made my stomach clench. "You and Dylan have arranged your transportation, right?" I paused, confused. "Transportation? I thought we were all flying together?" The silence stretched long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. "Oh, sweetie, we assumed you'd handle your own arrangements. Jennifer and Mark's tickets were, well, they were a wedding anniversary gift from Dad and me." I should have asked more questions. I should have pressed for details. Instead, I did what I always did. I smiled through the phone and said, "Of course, Mom. Dylan and I will figure something out." Because that's what the family peacekeeper does. She figures it out. The morning of departure, Dylan bounced around our apartment in his new swim trunks and flip-flops, his little suitcase decorated with airplane stickers he'd carefully applied the night before. "Are we leaving for the airport soon, Mom?" he asked for the 10th time, pressing his face against our living room window. I knelt down to his level, my stomach already churning with the anxiety I couldn't quite name. "Actually, buddy, we're taking a different kind of adventure to get there. Remember those big buses we see on the highway? We're taking one of those." Dylan's face scrunched in confusion. "But planes are faster, right? That's what you said." I forced my brightest smile, the one that had gotten me through years of disappointment. "Sometimes the journey is just as fun as the destination. We'll see mountains and forests and maybe even some wild animals from the bus windows." He seemed to consider this, his 8-year-old optimism still intact. "Okay, Mom. As long as we get there before Emma does. I want to find the biggest seashell first." If only he knew that while we'd be spending 12 hours on winding mountain roads, Emma would be sipping apple juice in a reclining business class seat, probably complaining to the flight attendant that the warm towel wasn't warm enough. The Greyhound station downtown smelled like diesel fuel and industrial disinfectant. Dylan's excitement dimmed slightly as we dragged our suitcases across the cracked concrete floor, past travelers who looked like they were carrying their entire lives in garbage bags. "Mom," he whispered, tugging at my jacket. "This place is kind of scary." I squeezed his hand tighter, my own unease growing with each announcement echoing through the terminal. "It's just different, sweetie. Different doesn't mean bad." Meanwhile, across town at the airport, I knew my family was probably already through security. Jennifer posting Instagram stories of Emma's first-time flying excitement, Mom and Dad enjoying coffee at some upscale terminal cafe. The contrast hit me like a physical weight in my chest, but I pushed it down. Family vacations weren't about how you got there. They were about being together once you arrived. The bus ride itself was a special kind of torture disguised as an adventure. Dylan threw up twice in the first 4 hours, his little body not equipped for the constant motion of winding mountain passes. I held a plastic bag while he retched, rubbing his back and whispering apologies he was too young to understand. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." Other passengers shot us annoyed looks, and I found myself shrinking into our seats, making ourselves as small and invisible as possible. During a rest stop in some nowhere town, I checked my phone to find our family group chat flooded with photos. Jennifer had documented every moment of their first-class experience. The champagne greeting, Emma's excitement over the airplane bed, even their gourmet meal served on actual plates. "Living our best life at 30,000 feet. She'd captioned a photo of Emma grinning with airline wings pinned to her shirt. I stared at that photo for a long time, sitting on a concrete bench outside a gas station convenience store while Dylan slept against my shoulder, exhausted from being sick. Emma looked so happy, so carefree, so loved. The kind of loved that comes with business class tickets and grandparents who think you deserve the best of everything. "Mom," Dylan mumbled against my neck, half asleep. "When we get there, will Grandma and Grandpa be happy to see us?" The question pierced through me like a knife. Of course they will, honey. Of course they will. But even as I said it, I wondered if I was lying to him, or to myself. When we finally arrived in Hawaii, 23 hours after leaving home, we looked exactly like what we were, two people who had survived a cross-country bus journey. My hair was greasy, Dylan's shirt was stained with vomit, and our budget suitcases looked shabby next to the designer luggage cart my family had waiting for us at the resort entrance. "There they are," Mom called out, but her smile seemed forced, like she was performing happiness for the other guests in the marble-floored lobby. Jennifer stood beside her in a fresh sundress, Emma practically glowing in her airplane wings, and a lei that someone had clearly bought her at the airport gift shop. They all looked so polished, so vacation-ready, while Dylan and I looked like refugees from some travel disaster. "How was your journey?" Dad asked, the pause before journey loaded with everything he couldn't quite say out loud. Before I could answer, Emma piped up with the brutal honesty that only 9-year-olds possess. "Mommy said you took a stinky bus because airplanes cost too much money for some people." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. I felt Dylan's hand slip into mine, his 8-year-old instincts picking up on the tension even if he couldn't understand it. Jennifer's face flushed slightly, but she didn't correct her daughter. Mom and Dad looked anywhere except at Dylan and me. And I stood there in that beautiful resort lobby with its tropical flowers and ocean views, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my entire life. "Well," Mom finally said, her voice artificially bright, "what matters is that we're all here together now. Let's get you two checked into your room so you can freshen up." The way she said freshen up made it clear that our appearance was somehow offensive to the family vacation aesthetic they had in mind. But something had shifted during those 23 hours of travel. Maybe it was holding Dylan while he was sick and having no one to help us. Maybe it was seeing those Instagram photos of Emma being celebrated while my son suffered in silence. Maybe it was Emma's casual cruelty delivered with a child's innocent smile. Whatever it was, a tiny crack had formed in the foundation of my lifelong belief that family loyalty was worth any sacrifice. As we followed the bellhop to our room, the smallest one in the resort, naturally, Dylan looked up at me with tired eyes and asked, "Mom, why didn't Grandma hug me hello like she hugged Emma?" And for the first time in 34 years, I didn't have a good answer that would protect both his feelings and the family peace. That first night, while Dylan slept off his travel exhaustion, I sat on our tiny balcony overlooking the resort's service road and dumpsters, a view that contrasted sharply with the ocean views I knew my parents and Jennifer were enjoying from their suites. I scrolled through social media, watching Jennifer post photo after photo of their perfect family vacation, each image a reminder of everything Dylan and I were excluded from. But the breaking point came the next morning at breakfast. The resort had a beautiful oceanfront restaurant where families were gathering for the complimentary buffet. I had dressed Dylan in his nicest clothes and combed his hair carefully, hoping we could blend in with the vacation happiness surrounding us. We were loading our plates with fresh fruit and pastries when I heard Emma's voice carry across the restaurant. "Daddy, why does Dylan smell like bus?" Her question was loud enough for nearby tables to hear, and I watched several other families turn to look at us with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. Mark, to his credit, looked mortified and tried to shush his daughter, but Jennifer just laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Emma, honey, some people take buses to get places. It's just different." The word different dripped with the same condescension I'd been hearing my whole life, but this time it was directed at my son. Dylan's face crumpled in confusion and hurt. At 8 years old, he was just beginning to understand that the world could be unfair, but having that lesson delivered by his own family in front of strangers was devastating. I watched my beautiful, innocent boy realize that his grandmother, his aunt, his cousin, the people who were supposed to love him unconditionally, saw him as somehow lesser. That's when the crack in my foundation became a chasm. I knelt down to Dylan's level right there in the middle of the restaurant, ignoring the stares and whispers around us. "You know what, buddy? You smell like adventure. You smell like someone brave enough to take the long road to get somewhere special. And that," I said, loud enough for my family to hear, "is something to be proud of." For the first time since we'd arrived, Dylan smiled a real smile, and for the first time in my life, I stopped caring whether my family approved of what I had to say. The rest of that breakfast passed in uncomfortable silence. Mom kept shooting me looks that clearly communicated her displeasure at my dramatic response to Emma's innocent question. Dad buried himself in his phone, pretending the whole interaction hadn't happened. Jennifer sat there with a slight smirk, like she'd won some contest I didn't even know we were playing. But I wasn't playing anymore. As I watched Dylan carefully eat his pancakes, his little shoulders still hunched with embarrassment, something fundamental shifted inside me. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about a little boy who had spent 12 hours throwing up on a bus so he could spend time with family members who thought he was worth less than a business class ticket. That afternoon, while Dylan napped in our room, I found myself walking the resort grounds alone, really looking at the place my family had chosen for our together vacation. The main pool where Jennifer was posting Instagram photos with Emma, the spa where Mom and Dad were enjoying couples massages, the oceanfront bar where everyone would gather for sunset drinks, everyone except the family members who couldn't afford the $15 cocktails. I realized that this vacation wasn't about family bonding at all. It was about showcasing a lifestyle that Dylan and I were meant to admire from the sidelines. We weren't family members on this trip. We were an audience for their performance of success and happiness. Standing there on the beach as the sun began to set, watching other families build sandcastles and splash in the waves together, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to spend the rest of this vacation, or the rest of my life, teaching my son that love came with conditions and that his worth was measured by someone else's generosity. It was time to stop being the family peacekeeper and start being Dylan's protector, even if that meant disappointing the people I'd spent 34 years trying to please. The war was about to begin, and for the first time in my life, I was ready to fight. The next morning, everything changed when a stranger showed me what real kindness looked like. I was sitting by the resort's smallest pool, the one tucked behind the maintenance building where the staff families brought their children, watching Dylan play with a little Hawaiian girl named Lilani. Her grandmother, Mrs. Chen, sat beside me in comfortable silence until Dylan did something that made her smile. "Your boy has such a gentle spirit," she said, watching Dylan carefully help Leilani build a sandcastle. "The way he makes sure she gets the prettiest shells first, that's good character. You're raising him right." Her words hit me like a revelation. Here was a complete stranger who saw my son's worth within 5 minutes of meeting him, while his own family had spent 2 days making him feel invisible. "You know," Mrs. Chen continued, "I've worked at this resort for 12 years. I've seen every kind of family vacation you can imagine. The ones shouting at each other by day 2, the ones who spend the whole time on their phones, the ones where the kids are treated like little accessories for social media photos. She gestured toward the main pool area where I could see Jennifer posing Emma for another Instagram shot. But families like yours, the real ones where love isn't conditional on how much money someone spent, those are rare and precious. I felt tears stinging my eyes. I'm not sure we qualify as a real family right now. Mrs. Chen turned to study my face with the wisdom that comes from decades of watching people. Honey, family isn't about who shares your blood or your last name. It's about who shows up for each other when things get hard. Who sees your worth even when you can't see it yourself. She nodded toward Dylan, who was now teaching Leilani how to skip stones. That little boy knows he's loved because you've shown him every single day. Some people get business class tickets. Some people get unconditional love. I know which one I'd choose. That conversation planted a seed that grew throughout the day. As I watched Dylan laugh and play with children who'd never judged him for taking a bus, as I saw him share his snacks with kids whose parents smiled at me with genuine warmth, I began to understand something that should have been obvious years ago. Normal people don't treat others the way my family had been treating us. That evening, while Dylan video called his best friend back home to show off the seashells he'd collected, I did something I'd never done before. I researched family dynamics. I typed words into Google that I'd never connected to my own life. Golden child versus scapegoat, narcissistic family patterns, emotional parentification. What I found made everything click into place with devastating clarity. The family therapist articles describing how dysfunctional families need one person to blame for all their problems. The psychology papers explaining how some children are raised to believe their worth comes from serving others' emotional needs. The support group posts from adults who'd spent decades wondering why they were never good enough, never deserving enough, never important enough. I was the scapegoat. Dylan, by extension, had become collateral damage in a system that required someone to be less than so everyone else could feel superior. Jennifer wasn't just the favorite daughter. She was the golden child who could do no wrong because I was always there to do everything wrong instead. The anger that hit me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not the quick flash of irritation when someone cuts you off in traffic, but a deep, burning rage at 34 years of manipulation disguised as family love. I thought about every birthday party where I'd been the free photographer while Jennifer got to be the celebrated guest. Every family crisis where I'd dropped everything to help while Jennifer was too busy with her important life. Every holiday where I'd cooked and cleaned and managed everyone's emotions while she got to show up looking perfect and take credit for the family togetherness. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was realizing that I'd been unconsciously preparing Dylan to take my place in this toxic hierarchy, teaching him that his needs came last, that making others happy was more important than his own well-being, that love had to be earned through endless service and sacrifice. That night, lying in our cramped resort room, listening to Dylan sleep peacefully for the first time since we'd arrived, I made a decision that terrified and liberated me in equal measure. We weren't going to play this game anymore. I started small the next morning. When Mom called our room at 7 a.m. with a list of things she needed me to handle, picking up Jennifer's dry cleaning from town, babysitting Emma while the adults went to the spa, organizing everyone's dinner reservations, I said something I'd never said before. No. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long I wondered if she'd hung up. Finally. Excuse me? I said no, Mom. Dylan and I have our own plans today. Which was true. We were going to explore the island's botanical gardens, something Dylan had been excited about since seeing a brochure in our room. Rebecca, this is a family vacation. We all need to contribute to making it special for everyone. You're absolutely right. Dylan and I will contribute by having a wonderful time together and not bothering anyone else with our needs. I could hear the confusion in her voice when she realized she couldn't argue with that logic. But the real test came that afternoon at the resort's family beach barbecue. It was one of those picture-perfect events where everyone gathers around tiki torches eating grilled pineapple and pretending they're having the time of their lives. Jennifer had coordinated matching outfits for her, Mark, and Emma, some Pinterest-worthy beachy aesthetic that she'd been planning for weeks. "Rebecca," Mom called out when she spotted Dylan and me arriving in our regular clothes. "Didn't you get Jennifer's text about the family photo outfits?" "I did," I replied calmly, helping Dylan get a plate from the buffet. "We decided to wear something comfortable instead." Jennifer's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Well, I guess we'll just have to work around that for the Christmas card photo." The implication was clear. Dylan and I would be cropped out or positioned where we wouldn't ruin the aesthetic. But something magical happened next. Emma, tired and overstimulated from 2 days of being used as a prop for social media content, had a complete meltdown. She threw herself on the sand, screaming that her dress was itchy and she wanted to go swimming but couldn't get it dirty, and she hated taking pictures and just wanted to play with the other kids. While Jennifer stood there frozen, unsure how to handle a child who wasn't performing perfectly, Dylan quietly walked over to his cousin. "Emma," he said in his gentle 8-year-old voice, "do you want to see the hermit crab I found? He's really shy, but I think he likes you." Emma's screaming stopped instantly. She looked up at Dylan with red, tear-streaked cheeks and nodded. Without another word, Dylan took her hand and led her down to the water's edge, away from the cameras and expectations and family drama. They spent the next hour building a small tidal pool habitat for the hermit crab, both of them laughing and getting sandy and being actual children instead of photo opportunities. I watched Jennifer's face cycle through emotions: surprise, embarrassment, and then something that looked almost like envy as she realized her daughter was happier with Dylan than she'd been all week with the planned family activities. "He's really good with her," Mark said quietly, coming to stand beside me. It was the first real conversation we'd had since arriving, and I was struck by how different he seemed when he wasn't performing the role of Jennifer's perfect husband. "Dylan has a good heart," I replied, watching our children play together like the cousins they should have been allowed to be all along. Mark was quiet for a moment, then, "Jennifer's been really stressed about this trip. The pressure to make everything perfect for social media, to prove we're this happy, successful family. It's been hard on all of us, especially Emma." He paused, watching his daughter laugh as Dylan showed her how to gently hold the hermit crab. "Maybe we've been so focused on looking like a perfect family that we forgot how to actually be one." That conversation stayed with me as the evening progressed. As I helped Dylan get ready for bed later, he said something that broke my heart and strengthened my resolve at the same time. "Mom, why was Emma so sad today? She has everything, the pretty dress and the airplane ride and everyone taking her picture." I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes, sweetie, having everything isn't the same as being happy. Sometimes people need space to just be themselves, without worrying about being perfect for other people." Dylan considered this with the serious expression he got when processing big concepts. "Is that why we took the bus? So we could be ourselves?" Out of the mouths of babes. "You know what, Dylan? Maybe it is." The next day, I implemented what I privately called Operation Boundary Setting. Instead of hovering around my family waiting for instructions or trying to anticipate their needs, Dylan and I struck out on our own. We took a local bus tour of the island's historical sites, ate lunch at a small family restaurant where the owner treated Dylan like an honored guest, and spent the afternoon at a beach where local families gathered instead of tourists. It was the best day we'd had since arriving. Dylan collected shells and learned to boogie board from some teenage boys who patiently taught him without any expectation of payment or gratitude. I read a book in the shade and actually relaxed for the first time in years. When other parents at the beach chatted with me, they talked to me like an equal, not like someone whose primary value was her willingness to serve others. But my family's reaction to our absence was swift and predictable. By the time we returned to the resort that evening, I had 14 missed calls and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. "Where are you? We've been looking everywhere." "The concierge said you left the resort. This is a family vacation." "Rebecca, call me back immediately. Everyone is worried sick." But the final message from Jennifer revealed what was really bothering them. Mom's been in tears all day because she planned this special lunch and you ruined it by disappearing with Dylan. How could you be so selfish? Selfish. There was the word that had controlled my entire life. Every boundary I'd tried to set, every need I'd expressed, every moment I'd put my own well-being or Dylan's needs first, it all got labeled as selfish. And for 34 years, that word had been enough to make me fold, apologize, and get back in line. Not anymore. I found my family gathered in the resort's main bar, their faces a mixture of anger and wounded martyrdom. Mom's eyes were red like she'd been crying, though I suspected it was more manipulation than genuine emotion. Dad looked stern in that way that used to make me scramble to fix whatever I'd done wrong. Jennifer sat with her arms crossed, radiating disapproval. "There you are," Mom said, her voice carrying just enough tremor to make nearby guests look over with concern. "We were so worried. We thought something terrible had happened to you and Dylan." I sat down calmly, Dylan settling beside me with his backpack full of shells and souvenirs from our day. "We're fine. We had a wonderful time exploring the island." "Without telling anyone where you were going?" Dad's voice carried that familiar tone of parental authority that had worked on me for decades. "We're adults on vacation, Dad. Dylan and I don't need permission to leave the resort." Jennifer leaned forward, her eyes flashing with anger. "This is supposed to be family time, Rebecca. Mom planned a special lunch to celebrate being together, and you just disappeared. Do you have any idea how hurt she was?" I looked around the table at these people who shared my DNA and my history, and for the first time in my life, I saw them clearly. Not as the family I needed to please and appease, but as individuals who had built their entire dynamic around having one person to blame, one person to manage their emotions, one person to make them feel better about themselves by always being less than. "I'm sorry Mom was disappointed," I said carefully. "But Dylan and I are not responsible for managing your emotions or your vacation experience." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's mouth opened and closed like she couldn't believe what she'd heard. Dad's face flushed red. Jennifer looked like I'd slapped her. "What has gotten into you?" Mom finally whispered. "This isn't like you at all." And that was the moment I realized she was absolutely right. The old Rebecca would have apologized profusely, promised to make it up to everyone, probably offered to plan something special to compensate for my terrible transgression of having a nice day with my son. But the old Rebecca had been suffocating under the weight of everyone else's expectations. The new Rebecca was learning to breathe. "You're right, Mom. This isn't like me." The old me would have spent this entire vacation making sure everyone else was happy, while Dylan and I disappeared into the background. But I'm not that person anymore. I stood up, Dylan's hand finding mine automatically. "Dylan and I are going to finish enjoying our vacation. If you'd like to spend time with us as family, real time, not just photo opportunities or free labor, we'd love that. But we're not going to apologize for existing or for taking up space anymore." As we walked away from that table, Dylan looked up at me with wide eyes. "Mom, are you okay? You seem different." I squeezed his hand, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I'm better than okay, sweetie. I'm finally learning how to stand up for both of us." The rest of our Hawaii trip passed in a strange new reality. My family made a few more attempts to guilt me back into my old role. Mom's dramatic sighs when I didn't volunteer to handle Emma's tantrums. Dad's pointed comments about family loyalty, Jennifer's passive-aggressive social media posts about some people ruining family harmony. But something had fundamentally shifted. Each time they tried to pull me back into the old dynamic, I felt like I was watching it from outside instead of being trapped within it. I could see the manipulation tactics that had controlled me for decades, and they simply didn't work anymore. On our last day, as we were packing to leave, Dylan asked me a question that made everything worth it. "Mom, when we get home, are we still going to be different?" I knelt down to his level, looking into his beautiful, trusting eyes. "What do you mean, baby? Are we still going to do fun things just for us? Are you still going to say no when people want you to do stuff that makes you sad?" I hugged him tight, this incredible little boy who had watched his mother find her backbone and was hoping she'd get to keep it. Yes, Dylan, we're going to be different in the best possible way. We're going to remember that we matter too. As our bus pulled away from the resort, yes, we were taking another bus home, but this time it felt like a choice rather than a punishment. I watched my family wave goodbye from the lobby. They looked smaller somehow, less powerful, like characters in a play I'd decided to stop watching. Dylan fell asleep against my shoulder as the Hawaiian mountains rolled past our windows, and I realized that this trip had given us exactly what we needed. Not the family bonding experience I'd originally hoped for, but something far more valuable, the understanding that we were complete on our own, that love shouldn't require us to shrink ourselves to fit other people's comfort zones, and that sometimes the best family vacation is the one where you finally learn to vacation from your family. The real journey was just beginning, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't wait to see where it would take us.